Turn on the news, scroll through your social media feed, and you'll be met with a constant barrage of alarming headlines. Crime wave sweeps the nation. Cities under siege. Is anywhere safe anymore? The stories are vivid, often terrifying, and they paint a picture of a society spiraling out of control. If the headlines feel scary, it's not because you're imagining it. They are designed to grab your attention, to evoke a strong emotional response. But there's a critical difference between the story the headlines are telling and the story the data reveals. The feeling of rising crime is pervasive, but is it based on reality? The truth is, our perception is being shaped by something far more powerful than statistics: narrative. It's because dramatic stories get all the spotlight. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the availability heuristic. Our brains tend to judge the frequency of an event by how easily we can recall examples of it. A single, shocking story of a violent crime, replayed endlessly on television and shared thousands of times online, becomes more mentally available than a dry, statistical report showing a nationwide decrease in that same crime. Media outlets competing for clicks and viewers naturally gravitate toward the most sensational content. A story about 1,000 planes landing safely is not news. A story about one plane crash is. In the same way, a story about millions of people going about their day safely doesn't generate headlines. A story about one violent incident does. This creates a feedback loop. The more we see these stories, the more we believe crime is rampant. This heightened fear then creates more demand for crime coverage, which news outlets are happy to supply. The result is a distorted view of reality, where the exception is presented as the rule. So, to get a clearer picture, we have to intentionally step away from the emotionally charged narratives and do what journalists and policymakers should be doing. Let's look at the numbers. But where do these numbers come from? The most comprehensive national data is collected by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI. For decades, their Uniform Crime Reporting, or UCR, program was the standard. It gathered monthly data from law enforcement agencies on a specific set of serious crimes. More recently, the FBI has transitioned to a more detailed system called the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. This system captures more context for each crime, providing a richer data set. While this transition has caused some temporary reporting gaps, the overall trend lines are still clear. We also have more immediate sources. Many major city police departments now maintain public-facing data dashboards, offering near real-time information on reported crimes. By combining these sources, we can build a robust and nuanced understanding of what's actually happening. Let's start with the most serious violent crime: homicide. This is often seen as a bellwether for overall crime trends, and here, the story is truly remarkable. After a deeply concerning spike in murders during 2020 and 2021, a period of immense social and economic disruption, the numbers began to fall. But the decline in 2025 wasn't just a small dip. Big picture, murders fell about 20% in 2025. To put that in perspective, that was the largest one-year drop we've seen in modern history. It's a decline of a magnitude that criminologists and data analysts have rarely, if ever, witnessed. It wasn't just a return to the norm, it was a historic correction. This single statistic directly contradicts the narrative of runaway violence. It suggests that the factors driving the pandemic-era spike were likely temporary, and that communities and law enforcement efforts have made significant headway in reversing that trend. But what about other forms of violence? Homicide, while the most severe, is also the rarest of violent crimes. When we look at the broader category of violent crime, which includes offenses like aggravated assault and robbery, we see a similar, though less dramatic, pattern. Following the 2020 spike, these crimes also began to recede. By the end of 2025, many violent crimes dipped to or below pre-pandemic levels. This means that your statistical risk of being a victim of robbery or assault in many places was lower than it was in 2019. This is a crucial piece of context that is almost always missing from news reports that focus solely on individual, frightening incidents. The slow, steady, and positive trend is simply not as compelling as a viral video of a crime in progress. Now let's turn to property crimes. These are far more common than violent crimes and can significantly impact people's sense of security. This category includes burglary, larceny, which is simple theft, and motor vehicle theft. Here, the data shows a consistent, long-term decline that was only briefly interrupted by the pandemic. In fact, property crimes dipped to or below pre-pandemic levels as well. Burglaries and larcenies in particular have been on a downward trend for years, and that trend continued through 2025. The one outlier in recent years has been motor vehicle theft, which saw a frustrating surge in many cities. However, even that metric began to show signs of improvement in 2025, with thefts leveling off or decreasing in many of the hardest-hit areas. So, while certain specific crime types can buck the trend temporarily, the overall picture for property crime is one of significant and sustained improvement. National averages are one thing, but crime is an intensely local issue. So let's zoom in. The positive trends we're seeing are not just statistical artifacts. They are happening in cities all across the country. Cities like Richmond, Virginia, saw major declines. After experiencing a painful increase in violence, the city saw homicides plummet by over 25% in 2025, a testament to focused community and policing efforts. On the other side of the country, Los Angeles saw major declines. As one of America's largest and most complex cities, LA is often in the national spotlight. While headlines focused on high-profile, smash-and-grab robberies, the overall data showed both violent and property crime rates falling, approaching the historic lows seen just before the pandemic. And in the nation's biggest city, New York saw major declines. Despite relentless media attention on crime and the subway system, the city experienced double-digit percentage drops in both murders and shootings. These are not isolated examples. From Baltimore to Chicago to Dallas, the data from 2025 pointed in the same direction. A significant and widespread decrease in the most serious forms of crime. This brings us to the central paradox. If the data is so clear, if homicides are down by a record amount, and if violent and property crimes are returning to pre-pandemic lows in city after city, so why do people still believe crime's rising? A recent poll showed that over 70% of Americans believe crime is getting worse, a perception that is completely at odds with the national data. The answer is complex, and it lies in the intersection of psychology, media, and memory. Media. We've already touched on this, but it's impossible to overstate its impact. It's not just traditional news. It's social media, neighborhood apps, and viral videos. These platforms operate on engagement, and nothing engages like fear and outrage. An algorithm will always push a shocking video of a carjacking to the top of your feed, while the FBI's quarterly crime report will never go viral. We are consuming a media diet that is hyper-focused on the most extreme and negative events, creating a powerful and misleading impression of the world outside our door. Memory. Our memories are not objective recordings of the past. They are colored by emotion. The fear and uncertainty of the 2020 crime spike are still fresh in our collective consciousness. That period created a new, higher baseline for our perception of crime. Even as the numbers fall dramatically, it takes a long time for our feelings to catch up. We remember the peak, not the valley. Furthermore, isolated violent incidents get non-stop coverage. The media often latches onto specific crime trends like the knockout game years ago or organized retail theft more recently. The relentless coverage makes these specific crimes seem like an epidemic, even if they represent a tiny fraction of overall crime, and even if the broader trends are moving in a positive direction. Meanwhile, steady long-term drops get ignored. There are no breaking news alerts for crime continues its gradual 20-year decline. Good news is often slow, incremental, and lacks a single dramatic event to anchor it. As a result, the positive, long-term reality is drowned out by the negative, short-term noise. Also, the 2020 pandemic caused a temporary spike. it's crucial to remember how disruptive that period was. It wasn't just the virus itself, it was the shutdown of social services, schools, and businesses. It was immense economic stress and a breakdown in the daily routines that structure society. This environment contributed to a tragic and very real increase in certain crimes, especially in shootings. Gun violence, in particular, surged in many communities that were already vulnerable. That rebound muddied the view. It created a new, alarming peak in the data that reset public perception. So now, even as we are seeing a historic drop that peak, many people only remember the climb. They are comparing the present to an idealized, pre-pandemic past, rather than acknowledging the remarkable progress made in just the last 2 years. Now, this positive news is not a declaration of mission accomplished. Experts warn we can't assume 2026 will follow the same trend. Criminologists are cautious, pointing out that the forces that drive crime are complex and can change quickly. Economic conditions, social policies, and even seasonal weather patterns can have an impact. They will be closely watching leading indicators, like gun sales and emergency room data for assaults, to see if the positive trends are holding. Sustaining these gains will require continued investment in proven strategies, from community violence intervention programs to effective constitutional policing. Complacency is the enemy of progress. But right now the data tells a clearer, quieter story than the headlines. It's a story of resilience and recovery. It shows that the alarming spike of the pandemic era was an anomaly, not a new normal. It demonstrates that progress is possible. Understanding this reality is not about dismissing the real pain of victims or ignoring the challenges that remain. It's about arming ourselves with facts so we can have more productive conversations about public safety. When our perception is divorced from reality, we can't make good decisions. We may demand policies that don't work or live in unnecessary fear. So the next time you see a frightening headline, take a moment. Ask yourself if it represents a trend or an anecdote. Seek out the data from reliable sources. Challenge the narratives of fear with the evidence of progress. The story of crime in America is complex, but the data offers a clear and hopeful chapter. Numbers over noise. That's the real takeaway.